Hey everyone, welcome to video 2 on TFSAs. Today in this video we're talking about TFSA contributions. You'll notice I've got a different background. I am in sunny Florida for the rest of August, just spending some time with family, relaxing, and I just had to make you this video because this is when TFSAs get really interesting. At the end of this video, I'm going to have a bonus tip on TFSAs, especially if you have a US tie, so stay tuned. Now, before I jump into the topic of TFSA contributions, I just wanted to share with you, I've created something called an investment flow guide. You can download it for free in the description box, so go and check it out and click on that link. Now, let's begin. First thing you need to know about TFSA contributions is this. If you are the account holder, you're the only one that can make decisions on how much you put in, how much you take out, and what you do with the money that's in there. In other words, what you invest in. This is really important. It is like the ultimate of independence. So it is a great investment account to have. And if you watch my first video, you'll learn about some of the basics in terms of how old you need to be, if there's a maximum age limit, there isn't, and some of the other criteria that you need to know before you get started. But really the key thing about TFSAs is that they are really for anybody, okay? Now they've got some great features which I'm going to talk about today that doesn't apply to any of the other registered types of investment accounts like RSPs and LIRAs and LIFs and any of that. So it's got some great features and benefits that stand out on its own. Let's begin. So we're going to talk about 4 types of TFSA contributions. We're going to talk about regular contributions, unused contributions, over contributions, and exempt contributions. Now, if you watch my first video, the basics of TFSAs, you know that you can open your TFSA account as early as age 18, as long as you're a resident of Canada, no maximum age by the way, and you have a valid social insurance number. The TFSA started in 2009 with an annual limit of $5,000. Now, this is not income-based, so if you had the money or someone gave you the money, you could put it into your TFSA account, easy peasy. Now what they did though is they made sure that it was indexed to inflation and increased by every $500. So in 2009 the annual limit was $5,000, but when you take an inflation rate of 2.5%, let's say, I think at the time it was 2%, and you calculate that, it didn't quite reach the next $500 in 2010. Now the time that it changed and increased was in 2013. It started the annual limit at $5,500, so $5,500, and it increased so on. There was one special year, which was in 2015, and that was increased to $10,000. That was a bit of a political issue, but then it was quickly decreased the following year back to the regular number that it was, which was the $5,500. As of 2004, in 2025, the annual limit is now $7,000. I expect it to jump to $7,500 over the next year or two. Now here's the thing we know about contributions is if you had the ability to contribute based on the criteria being age 18, being a resident of Canada, and having a valid social insurance number, but you didn't put the money in yet for whatever reason, it was there waiting for you. That contribution room was accumulating and waiting for you, which means that if you're ready today and you have the money, you put as little or as much as you want, but you know that you have this amount of room waiting for you that allows you to benefit from tax-free status of that money that you invest in and the earnings that it accumulates over time. If you haven't had the opportunity to invest in a TFSA or put your savings or your money into a TFSA, please know that if you had contribution room accumulating, it has been sitting there waiting for you. It is like you buying a piece of land and it's just waiting to be developed, right? So take advantage, because I'm going to tell you some goodies that you need to know in this video about contribution limits. Now, if I haven't mentioned this already, just for fun, I have created an investment flow guide. It's based on some of my observations and experiences over the 20 plus years I've been in financial services, and it really breaks down based on the type of investor you are. What are some of the tools, the do's and don'ts, some of the resources that really benefit you based on how you need to invest? Go ahead, it's a free downloadable guide and you can find that in the description box in my video. Let's continue. Now, how do you find out information about your TFSA contribution room? Well, there's a couple of ways. Where you find your TFSA contribution room You can either look it up in your CRA account, Canada Revenue Agency account. You can call TIPS, which is the Tax Information Revenue Services, and I'll link to it in my description box so it's easy for you to reference. Usually you also get that information in your notice of assessment, but that's based on information that's reported, so you always have to double check because ultimately you as the account holder are responsible for making sure that that information is accurate, or you can calculate it yourself. So how do you calculate TFSA room? Well, it's based on the TFSA dollar limit of the current year plus any unused TFSA contribution room from previous years and any withdrawals that you may have made in the previous year. That is how you calculate your TFSA contribution room. Now, just to make it easy for you, I've created a link in the description box directly from CRA that gives you a great worksheet on how to calculate your current annual limit plus the unused room based on how old you were when you were 18 and was the TFSA around at that time, as well as any withdrawals that you made. It has a really clear outline and structure to help you figure out how to calculate your TFSA room. And they've got a little link, I'll put it in the picture here, of what the annual limits were for every year, okay? So go and check out that information. There's a picture here in the video as well, so you can take a quick peek. Let's talk about overcontributions. Now, overcontribution means that you have contributed more than the annual limit and any unused room you had, plus any previous withdrawals you had. So if you know the contribution limit for your account and you've contributed that and then some more, then you have officially exceeded the contribution room. There is a penalty for that because of the tax benefits that do apply to the investment earnings within the account, and there's no tax on withdrawals, which I will talk about in another video. They do apply a penalty of 1% of the extra amounts above your allowable limit per month. So that's really important to know. Now, there's a couple ways to fix that. Either you take out the extra amount or you pay that 1% every month until the following year when the annual limit resets. So I've touched a little bit on the unused room as well as the regular contribution room. I just want to give a little tip. A lot of people feel that they can only contribute to TFSAs on an annual basis, but that's simply not true. And in fact, oftentimes the best strategy is every time you get a paycheck, you set up an automatic payment to go to your TFSA account. So whether you have a TFSA through your company benefits, whether you've set it up through the bank, or whether you've set it up through online investing, whatever the case may be, you have an account number. You can set that up as a payee and then set it up every time you get paid to just put money into your TFSA account. Every 2 weeks, every month, that's really up to you. But that way you can stay consistent with your savings goals with a TFSA. Now let's talk about exempt contributions. This isn't the kind of contributions that's really talked about a lot, but is so important to know because it usually comes up in either death or divorce. Let's talk about it. When you have somebody who has passed away, but they were married, either a spouse or common law, there is something called an exempt contribution where the TFSA account can transfer over to the spouse or common law without any penalties. That's called an exempt contribution, and that happens in the event of one spouse's death. If you named your spouse as successor holder, whether in your TFSA account when you first set it up or in your will, then you don't need some of the extra forms. The advisor can help facilitate the transfer of the TFSA account and whatever's left in there directly into the surviving spouse or common law spouse's TFSA account with no penalties. One thing I wanted to mention though, in terms of the deadline for when one person in the partnership passes away and the assets need to be moved from that person's TFSA who's now passed to the surviving spouse's TFSA, there is a deadline. And that deadline is that it has to be moved over and forms completed and has to be moved over by the following year, the end of the calendar year of the following year that that person passed away. So, for example, if one spouse passed June 2023, the surviving spouse would have until December 31st of 2024 to move the assets from the TFSA over into their own TFSA, into their own name. Okay, even if they never had a TFSA before, they can open one up and move it over. That's because there is no tax penalty on that. And that's really important because when a spouse passes away, usually a lot of the assets may be taxable. Some things can shift over to a spouse, but other things, they may be fully taxable. And that just reduces the amount that's left over for the people who have survived that person. One of the things you need to know when somebody passes away and the surviving spouse inherits the TFSA is that if they're the successor holder and they inherit the TFSA, they become the new holder of that TFSA, meaning that they have the right to change the beneficiary of their TFSA. So I think that's a really important thing to know. Most people don't consider some of these legalities in advance, but applied knowledge is power. So managing your TFSA, how you set up your TFSA, and how the assets are passed on are a part of family planning, legal planning, and just tax efficiency in general. The other time that this comes up is when there is a breakdown of a relationship and both parties are living separate and apart, and there's been a judgment through the court in terms of dividing the assets, including investment accounts. Oh yes, your RSPs, your TFSAs is all available for division of assets when you are going through separation and divorce. So this is important, you need to know. And if it's not you, you probably have a friend or two that is going through something like this, and you just let them know, hey, Annie from Annie Unleashed talked about this. I think you should really know what this is all about. So if there is a judgment from a court based on a breakdown of a relationship where people are living separate and apart and they're dividing all their assets, including property, banks, retirement accounts, investment accounts, and all of that, then the TFSA can be moved, or an amount, a partial, whatever the amount is, can be moved from an ex-spouse's TFSA directly over into the other ex-spouse's TFSA with no penalties. But that requires some legal involvement. So tax efficiency is a really key part of TFSAs, and knowing how to use it is also really, really important. And again, I always recommend seeking the advice and knowledge of a qualified and experienced investment advisor like myself or financial planner before you make any decisions. And please, these kinds of videos are for education purposes, but they are meant to help you out so that you know what questions to ask or what to look into if you're going to do it yourself. And now my bonus tip. If you are a Canadian resident with US ties, or you are a US citizen living in Canada, the benefits of having a TFSA don't apply to you. There is no US treaty that recognizes the tax benefits of a TFSA account. And what that means for you is there's no point in you opening up a TFSA account to take advantage of the tax benefits because it won't apply to you. Your earnings, your withdrawals will be taxable to you when you do your taxes. So just keep an eye out for that. I have had clients who decided to open up a TFSA through some online company, and when it's kind of a self-serve situation, these questions don't come up. And when I was in conversation with this person and I asked questions about them and their life and their family, qualitative questions, it came up that they had US ties, but they had opened up a TFSA account in Canada, only to realize through our conversation that there was no benefit to them to doing that. And in fact, they were going to get penalized and taxed. All right, so that's some key highlights on contributions to a TFSA. In our next video, we're going to cover the investments of a TFSA and how they might affect government benefits and credits. I hope you enjoyed this video. Again, don't forget to download that free guide, Investment Flow Guide, and I think that will really help you, some do's and don'ts depending on how you invest, some affirmations, as well as platforms that might benefit you based on how you need to invest. I look forward to your feedback. Please feel free to write something in the comments. I do respond to them. And if you have any ideas for topics that you'd like me to cover, please feel free to connect with me and I'm happy to look into it. All right, see you in the next video. Take care.